More and more Russian refineries are getting taken offline, while the Ukrainians have done so far one of their biggest strikes against Russia. This is happening while there is good news in other fronts as well, as there is likely a significant addition in artillery firepower for the Ukrainians on the horizon. But we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened along the front lines and behind them in the SITREP about the war in Ukraine. There have been additional drone sightings all over Europe, and the German Chancellor believes it is coming from the Russians. Germany arrested a Croatian citizen 700 meters away from the airport in Frankfurt, where he was flying a drone. The Russians also keep harassing satellites from the United Kingdom with electronic warfare, and the British are also reporting that there have been close approaches by satellites of the Russians, as have in the past been happening with other nations as well. The Russians struck Ukraine on the 4th with 3 Iskander and 109 drones. The Ukrainians were only able to intercept 73 of the drones. 3 missiles as well as 36 drones made it through and have hit 21 targets. That's a success rate of 33%, a fairly high one despite the small scale attack. According to the Ukrainians, among the targets hit was a storage facility for grain. We can see the picture here. Theoretically, this could mean that either the Russians have changed something in their attacks, be it tactics, be it technology, or that they are simply striking targets that are less well defended, as probably a grain storage facility is, simply because the Ukrainians can't defend everything, so they need to focus on the most important locations. The Russians also conducted a massive attack on Lviv. 53 missiles and cruise missiles as well as 496 drones were used in this attack. Ukraine managed to intercept 38 of the cruise missiles, 1 missile, one Kinshal, and 439 drones, meaning that 8 missiles as well as 57 drones made it through and hit 20 targets. 140 of those drones and 23 cruise missiles were aimed against Lviv. In Lviv alone, 4 civilians were killed, 8 others were wounded. Ukraine struck back though with at least 251 drones. This attack hit a ammunition factory in Sverdlov, which is one of Russia's biggest ammunition factories. Several heavy explosions were being reported. The Russians also, the Russian Feodosia oil terminal was also hit. As we can see in the background, a huge fire has started. Another target was an ammunition depot on the Crimean Peninsula. Also happening was a power outage inside of Belgorod after an attack on an electrical substation. The Ukrainian President Zelensky has confirmed that it's one of the targets of these attacks is also to send a message to the Russians that the war is painful and to basically increase the incentives to start serious negotiations to end the war. Among the other targets that were hit was a refinery in Leningrad once again, the refinery in Tyumen and the Kostovo refinery. Also the Krishi refinery has stopped producing in its biggest part, its most productive facility. So it continues that the Russian oil processing is diminishing. It's under heavy pressure now from the Ukrainians. According to the Ukrainian president, it's not just drones that are being used. So he says it's other means as well. But he also said that the domestic long-range facilities will be laid open, will be publicized later to not give the enemy time to prepare when he was asked about the Ukrainian missiles. So nothing concrete in this direction yet. We switch to the developments along the front line, and we start off at Sumy, where we have no change along the front line. We go to Kharkiv. Nothing I can confirm here either. On the Eastern Front, we have the Russians being reported to have built an auxiliary bridge over the Sherebets because of bad weather. This was confirmed here inside of Nevske. This is on the map. It's here. Somewhere here over the Sherebets, the bridge was laid. This allowed the Russians to transfer heavy equipments, tanks, IFVs, and an SPG over to the western side of the Sherebets, and showing us once again that drones can only work if the weather is actually allowing for it, which is one of the still remaining huge disadvantages and one of the reasons why artillery is not being replaced by drones. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we have the Russians coming closer to the town of Seversk itself from the southeast. We see recently they have been in Vimka. Now they are just a few hundred meters away, or roughly a kilometer and a half from the southeasternmost houses of the town of Seversk itself. The Russians also attacked a bridge at Raihorodok here over the Seversky Donetsk. We have a video of this happening. And as we can see, and this is interesting, the bridge was already blown initially. Here. You see that these pieces are down. You also see that the railroad bridge is also blown up, but the strike still hits it. And once the perspective changes, we see what was likely the real target. That was this pontoon bridge, that auxiliary bridge, right in the shadow of it. And it seems likely that the bomb was actually aimed at this bridge, not at the original bridge. And basically it sacrificed itself to keep the auxiliary bridge in operation here in this direction. That's it from the Seversky region. By the way, we have it zoomed in here where we can see that that piece of the bridge is already down. This was it from this direction. In the Kostiantynivka direction here, I also have no changes. The Russians have advanced though in Volodymyrivka in the Pokrovsk region. We have that here at this point. This was likely defeated, so this is not necessarily a proof in the change of front line, but we see that the Russians keep their activities up to maintain the communication with their positions further north or to the northeast of Dobropilia, and basically in this area they want to keep up the communication and thus widen the area which they can use for communications. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, have advanced in Novoshachove. We have that here, geolocated directly north of Doroshnie. This is here. Here the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians further to the east, and the Russians have also advanced in southern Pokrovsk. We have fresh geolocations of them here at this point, directly in the south of Pokrovsk. Whether it's an actual advance or just further operations in the contested area here in the gray zone is unclear, but we once again have Russians confirmed in this direction. The Russians, according to a Ukrainian non-com operating in this area, said that the Russians mostly attack with single soldiers right now, but they are using more gliding bombs, which have become more accurate. So which shows us that the activity of the Russians remains there, but it continues to switch in tactics, and right now single soldiers supposedly operating, which also would explain a lot of infiltrations. And we've recently talked about it, that there have been previous sightings of single soldiers being engaged without any support seemingly. So the Russians seem to actually send single soldiers here. And that was it with the territorial changes. The Russians are currently not really advancing. The Ukrainian counterattacks are fairly limited as well. We now expect the activity should go down, not just with the Rasputitsa, the mud season, but also with the lack of foliage that could provide cover and thus enable drones even more. So how it's going to continue is unclear, but we see that the front line will probably not move too much over the next coming weeks and maybe even months. The Russians receive support though. We have a video here. We have a report here. According to the United States, the Russians have received 1,000 to 5,000 Cuban mercenaries fighting for them in Ukraine. This shows how the war gets increasingly international in this regard. In troop generation from Ukrainian side, we have Zelensky saying that the Ukrainians are now producing 40 Bogdana per month. This is likely, though, not just self-propelled guns, self-propelled artillery, but also drawn artillery which is not self-propelled. This is not really an issue in the current situation, as drones have made it close to impossible to actually shoot and scoot in the rear areas, as artillery is being hunted down when it's moving. So if it's shooting from a underground position that is receives camouflage and cover, then the difference between self-propelled and being drawn artillery is rather limited, except of course in price. But still, 40 artillery pieces a month is breathtaking in the amount of production the Ukrainians have now stood up in their own artillery regards. In the political sphere, we have continued Russian attempts to prevent the delivery of Tomahawk missiles by the United States, continuous threats that are coming from the Russians. It would sabotage the improving relationships between the two nations, says Vladimir Putin. He also claimed in the past that US soldiers have to participate in strikes, which is obviously nonsense if the Ukrainian soldiers are trained in operating and if they have been handed over targeting data, which is now being confirmed. At the same time, there's always threats about escalation all the time, and usually combined with threats of nuclear weapons. But this is nothing new. We've seen that in the past as well, when aid was considered, be it air defense, artillery, main battle tanks, or fighter planes. Every single time the Russians act like this is going to start World War III, and this is going to be a direct engagement of Western nations if they deliver some weaponry. We have very surprising news from Slovakia, which has now agreed on an aid package for Ukraine. In Slovakia, Fico was elected, who is pro-Russian, and since his election, there was no more aid that was sponsored by the Slovakians. They still sold artillery to Ukraine, but they didn't deliver any aid anymore. And now there's being reported that mine clearing and engineering equipment is going to be delivered. And we also have the news here from Militani, and it's spread in other areas as well, that supposedly Greece will likely deliver 60 203mm self-propelled artillery to Ukraine. This is the M110A2. It will be delivered together with 150,000 rounds of artillery, among them 30,000 rounds of cluster munition. This is not a direct aid package, as Greece is receiving money to basically make up for that capability to buy newer equipment. The artillery system, the 203 M110A2, has up to 30 kilometers in range, and while it has a fairly slow fire rate, this should not be the biggest issue in the current scenario, where the artillery is firing from underground positions, just with an opening for the artillery to shoot out. And at the same time, the 203 obviously has a significantly higher shell weight, up to 100 kilometers, up to 100 kilograms and more, and thus the ability to do significantly more damage that can be that can be used by the Ukrainians for great effect. And that was it for today's SITREP. Not too much has happened. If you still enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment if you have something to add. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.